a lot of it, we need to keep that ball, whether you're grabbing it off the ground and you're bringing it close to the chest, okay, really important, all right? We need to be strong, and not only that, it actually, the muscles in our back are really good for posture.
Hey there, welcome to our podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, could you please do us a solid? If you're enjoying what you hear, give us a 5-star rating and hit that subscribe button on your platform. It really helps us reach more parents, coaches, and youth in the youth athlete development scene. All right, let's get into this week's chat.
Welcome back to the In Athlete podcast. We are rejoined with Coach Nathan again. How you been?
Good, mate. Good to be here.
Working hard at Richmond?
Yes. Going well. It's actually a holiday break at the moment, so happy to have a little bit of a break and just to catch up on a bit of work and prep up for the next term, and also have some time just to relax and to chill out as well.
Lovely. So, so you know a little bit about training athletes.
That's right. I've been teaching now. This is my third year teaching, and I think fourth year with our education online that we deliver. So, hundreds of coaches that I've had in front of me to sort of help them understand how to develop programs, how to coach and especially around that young athletes. And that's kind of what I specialise in.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we've got you here today. We're going to talk a little bit around what successful strength training programs entail for youth athletes specifically.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think that I wanted to talk about this because it was something that a lot of, I guess, if you are not a strength and conditioning coach, so parents, sport coaches, we don't all know everything, right? So strength and conditioning, fitness, exercise science, that whole world is there's a lot of complexities to that, all right? So, you and I, we both did our 3-year exercise science degree. We did a whole heap of work experience, a lot of external courses. There's a lot of content out there. And there's a lot of strength and conditioning programs, a lot of fitness programs, a lot of online programs. There's so much out there. So I wanted to sort of take the opportunity to go, hey, what does an actual successful program look like for a youth athlete? So if you are a parent, you are someone that's looking into programs, looking into a strength and conditioning coach and wanting to ask others around, what the program entails, well, hopefully I can sort of give you that formula. What is that successful formula that a program should have? And then we'll sort of just dive into, those components of that, what that program should look like. And then hopefully that would help, with some of the decision making if you were to go down that path.
Yeah, for sure. I guess when I look back to when I was a youth athlete, it was a very confusing place to start, Googling, best program for X, Y, Z, and even for parents, we don't expect the parents to know where to start. That's what our job is, to help the child or the youth athlete know where to start and to write a program for them. So we would hope that this podcast helps to shine a light on what programs should have in them so that your child gets the best benefits out of the program. Yeah,
definitely. I probably should even say that, I started gym probably when I was 14, 15 years old, and I was in that boat where I didn't have any support. There wasn't really anyone that specialised in youth, and personal trainers they only really trained adults. It was always, difficult to find resources and people that were knowledgeable in the field. And, I went to bodybuilding programs and things like that, and really I just wanted to be better at my sport, but they were the only programs out there, and I just sort of did that, and they weren't that successful. I got a little bit bigger, a little bit fitter, but at the end of the day it didn't actually make me that much better at my sport. So I guess that's why we're having this chat today. So I think I'll start with sort of the formula, and I think I'll go through each component, and if there's anything you want me to draw out, just let me know. But before, a program, in previous podcast, we talked about sort of the needs analysis. So we need to understand the athlete, where they're at, their sport, their needs, their strengths, their weaknesses, all of those sort of things first. So once we've done that, okay, then we're ready to formulate a program. And typically there's a few elements to that, right? The first one is there needs to be a warm-up. Yeah, before you do any physical activity, okay, the body needs to be prepared for that, right? If you just sit on a couch for 2 hours and then, in the same position, and then I said, get up now, we're going to go play your footy game, your basketball game, okay, you're not going to be feeling great. You're going to be tight, you're going to be sore, you're going to be stiff, okay, and probably going to be, you're probably going to, increase your risk of getting injured, right? So that's something that we obviously don't want to do when we do a physical preparation or a strength and conditioning program. Same thing, you to do some active stuff, intense, explosive, all these sort of things. So we've got to be prepared for it. So, okay, if we're going to warm up, well, what does that warm up look like? Okay, it's not, maybe a typical as a sport, maybe warm up. Some warm ups, you go for a couple of laps, jog and maybe do some stretches, bits and pieces. So there is some similarities to that, but in a program that is, I think, going to be most effective is something that goes through the ranges of motion that you would typically do in that exercise, or in that probably program, right? So if it's if you're going to do some speed work, if you're going to do some strength movements and all of that. So it is a strength and conditioning program. So there is going to be elements of strength movements. There's going to be elements of conditioning the athlete in movements that they're going to do in their sports and things like that. So we've got to go through what we call mobility exercises, okay? And typically that is just going through ranges of motion. So they're not typically stretches as such, but they are going through ranges of motion. So it could be like arm circles, or those who play footy, sort of your leg swings, okay? It could be, sort of some windmills. There's rotations, there's world's greatest. There's a lot of different sort of exercises where you're twisting, you're turning, your arms and limbs are going through range of motions. Close the gates, open the gates, all these sort of things. And typically what we would find is that we want to sort of mobilize the joints, and typically the joints that we want to mobilize that's going to be most used is sort of your ankles, your hips, and your shoulders, and probably your spine as well, okay? So those are the areas in the body that we would like to get from that sort of maybe stiff position into a more mobile, loose position that we can then go through ranges of motion. So that's something that we'd like to do before going into any sort of activity. Another area we might do is what we call activation. So it's now activating the muscles at a low intensity in order to just wake them up, get them ready to go, fire up the nervous system, fire up, the muscle system, get some blood pumping into the muscles or the areas of the body that we want to train. And through some of those movements, we would then start to increase body temperature, because we know that when we increase body temperature, okay, the muscles are warm, okay, which is why it's called a warm up, right? And it's going to prepare us for that session. Some of those activation exercises might actually help with posture. So we know that if our posture is quite poor, it does have a negative effect on our performance, right? Whether it is in your training session, whether it is in your sport, things like that, especially in the gym. That's something we emphasize a lot on, because we know that if our spine is in a bad position, we can probably do some damage. If you're doing a bad position, your spine's not in the right position. We talk about neutral spine being the optimal position. Typically, your shoulders are back. You're in a nice, proud position. Okay, if you're slouched over, right, shoulders are rolled forwards. Okay, typically, if I went out and played sport like that, shoulders rolled over, hunched back. Okay, typically, you're not going to be marking the ball right. You're not going to be catching the ball. You're not going to be expressing power that great, right? And most, if you're doing that while you sit here and listen to this podcast and you're rolling your shoulders forward, you don't typically feel athletic. But as soon as you roll your shoulders back, open up, get your posture up, chest up, all that sort of thing, you're going to feel better, right? And probably if you're doing it while you're listening to this, right, you already feel ready to go. You feel powerful, you feel proud, all those sort of things. And that's the same with sort of your pelvic positioning. And we do a lot of that here in Athlete around, getting your body in the right spine alignment, your right pelvis, alignment, and getting all the right muscles and postures ready to go. So there's sort of a few components, a few examples of what the warm-up looks like. Was there anything that you wanted to add to that as well?
Yeah, a really good acronym for any parents or any students out there wanting to understand some key sort of areas or key objectives with the warm-up is the RAMP acronym. Yep. So a really good acronym or word to think about when designing your warm-up is RAMP. So RAMP, R being raising your heart rate and your body temperature.
That's right.
A for activate, so like we said, activating the key muscle groups required for the demands of the main session of the sport. Mobilize, so again, mobilizing the key joints and muscles required for the sport. And then finally, potentiating or priming,
correct,
which involves the neuromuscular or the, revving the engine so that it's ready to go explosively. But also, if we look at the word ramp, we want the warm-up to essentially have a ramp up to the intensity of the session, of the main session itself. So let's say for the majority of the session, we're working at around 80% of your max heart rate. We want to slowly raise the intensity of the warm-up to the intensity of the session.
That's right.
So for any students out there wanting to understand how to make a warm-up effective, ramp's a really good way to start with.
No, I really like that one as well. We do teach that as well in the programs that we have cover. And I think that when you think of it, yes, you've got to gradually build it up to that intensity. You're not going to go from from the couch to straight to sprinting a 100-meter sprint, right? You need to gradually get to that intensity. Same with any cardiovascular training. Can't get your heart rate from 60 beats per minute to 170 just like that. You've got to gradually build up to it. So, really important. I like that. Great acronym. Okay, so once the athlete's warm, we've done some movements, we've got them ready to go, right? They're primed, they're awake, they're ready to go. So typically, we work with a lot of athlete populations, right? They want to get better at their sports, but a lot of the sports we work with, they need to be quick, explosive, fast, things like that. So we typically will then do some sort of power movements or what we call SAQ, which is speed, agility, quickness movements. All right. So these would be that while the body's fresh, okay, not much fatigue has gone through, we've just done a warm up, we want to now do some explosive things. So no weight, just body weight things. So it might be some sprint technique work. It might be some sprints. It might be agility work. So change direction, you're doing your cuts, so you're sort of moving and zigzagging, your diagonal cuts, you might be moving sideways, shuffling, things like that. That's very similar to the movements that we do in our sports. You might even throw in there some jumping, okay? So a lot of that is lower body based, and as we know, majority of the sports, our feet are on the ground, whether it's field or court based, right? So those movements that we typically see on the field, let's take the ball away and let's just really focus on the technical side of things, because we know that, just a few centimeters, millimeters is really important, in order to get yourself that extra edge in the field, in the court, to get position, to get to the ball, to get to the goal quicker, whatever it is. So we really want to take that opportunity while the body's fresh to work on those physical competencies. And then you might even also add some medicine ball or throwing or things where you express the full body, because we know that a lot of the power that we express comes from the lower body and it's transferred to the upper, and you would express through whether it's a throwing, whether it's twisting the body. Same with when you're tackling, right? The whole body is moving together. So we like to use some sort of like med ball throws, some keg tosses. We like to do some sort of like rugby throws and throw them straight into the wall, getting a rotational movements through there. It's very athletic. So we think about that those movements before we get into anything that's a little bit slower, a little bit more weight. We want to be really athletic, explosive, light, quick, and those sort of things. Did you have any other examples?
Yeah, so coming back to the RAMP acronym, the priming or the potentiation component blends in really well with the power component, with the SAQ component. But if we understand what power is just an expression of strength. It's an expression of your body's ability to rapidly produce force.
That's right.
But that always comes down to the amount of strength you have. So if you have a low base of strength, you probably won't be very powerful, which sort of leads to a nice segue to this component.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even before I sort of move on to that is that we need to make sure that these exercises are at the level of that athlete. Yeah, so we hope that, beforehand we understand the age of the athlete, the amount of time that they've been training, in the gym, if they've got minimal experience to maximal experience, it is going to change what exercises we use. There is a lot of drills, a lot of different exercises that we can choose from, but, we need to understand that we need to choose exercise that's suitable for their level. So, leading into the strength movement. So, we've warmed the athlete up. We've done some explosive athletic movements. Okay, now the athlete needs to top up their strength side of things. So we want to now go from improving or working on that expression of power and force in that real fast movements, and now we want to actually try and improve how much force that we can produce. So these exercises that we choose are movements, and I say movements, right? So when I think of training athletes, I think of, okay, what movements is going to transfer into their sport, right? So typically a lot of us should probably know what a squat sort of looks like. Now we know that a lot of gym programs have squats, but what is a squat? Why is that so, important? Why is that something that's quite common? Well, we also use squats as a very common and very effective exercise that transfers into our sports. Yeah. So I'll go through a few different movements examples that you guys can see what exercise we choose and how they transfer. So if I start with the squat, we know that that movement is very similar to a jumping movement, right? So it's the same movement. Your body needs to be lowered towards the ground, and then you're pushing your body up towards the sky, the roof, whatever it is, vertically, okay? So those who are trying to improve a vertical jump, okay, then you're in a strength exercise where you're adding weight, whatever, or some sort of resistance. You're now trying to strengthen the muscles in that used in order to propel yourself or push yourself up. So that's going to transfer nicely into those athletic movements. So squats is one that's really important. Deadlifts or hinge pattern is another really important movement, and I'm going to start with sort of the lower body and sort of move up the chain. So another one is the deadlift. So typically some people might get a bit scared when they think of deadlift, and that's why we use sort of the word hinge, because it's a little bit kinder and a little bit doesn't sound as aggressive, but that movement is actually even more really important as well. And typically they're sort of helping with movements that go on a horizontal plane. So if you're moving forward, okay, where it's a jumping forward, if you're sprinting forward, okay, these deadlifts are training the muscles that are specific to your sprinting forward, jumping forward, and things like that. So really important that needs to be in your strength program or the strength side of things. Obviously there's some sort of there's variations of those. So depending on where the athlete is, we will use squats and deadlifts probably in like a double limb position, so 2 feet on the ground to start with, because it's quite we need to get the technique right. Okay, so we'll talk about that a lot as in the strength side of things. And pretty much anything that we do, technique needs to be is most important for us, and then the load and the resistance that we do would sort of come after. So we need to make sure the athlete's safe, they're training safe, they've got the right technique before we move on to really loading up that athlete to try and elicit some improvements in strength. So squats and deadlifts, we know, are really important. So let's move into sort of the upper body side of things, right? So if you think about a chest pass, right? A chest pass, so if you're basketball, netball, even football, when you're doing a handball, okay, it sort of goes in that same movement. The arms are pushing forwards in front of you, okay? We call that a horizontal push. So on a horizontal plane, you're just standing up tall and you're moving your arms forward, okay? That is a horizontal push. And what that is a movement that we know is quite important in a lot of sports. You're expressing power or force forwards, right? Even if you're doing a fend off in footy and things like that. So the muscles used in that is typically, the muscles incorporating to move your bodies and your limbs and your joints and things to that position, okay, that probably is something that we need to train, right? So if you think of push-ups, bench press, okay, things like that, these are the movements that's going to really, these are the exercises that's going to help with those movements and strengthen the muscles in that area. And the opposite is then now pulling backwards, so horizontal pull, so bringing the limbs towards the body, okay, and the elbows sort of going behind you, okay, shoulder blades squeezing back, okay. These are, again, another really important movement, especially if you're trying to get possession of the ball, right? A lot of it, we need to keep that ball, you know, whether you're grabbing it off the ground and you're bringing it close to the chest, okay, really important, all right? We need to be strong, and not only that, it actually, the muscles in our back are really good for posture, right? Keeping good posture, shoulders back, nice, good, neutral spine, and that actually gives us a real strong base when we are playing, especially contact sports. We need to have a real strong back in order to stay in those positions. So there's another movement, right? We've got a few more, so stay with me. Now we've got to look at, okay, well, we've got a push and pull movement in front and behind our body. Okay, now we've got to go think about, all right, well, there's a lot of movements that happen above the head. Yeah, so if we're going up for a mark, okay, our hands come up right on top of our head, right? So we need to strengthen the muscles there as well, right? We need to be able to get a nice, stable shoulder joint, okay? And typically, a lot of those movements, and we call that a vertical push, okay? We're pushing things forward, over our head, towards the roof, towards the sky, whatever you want to call it. And the muscles used in that, okay, are really important. So, because movements like, you know, going up for a mark, whether it's catching a ball, whether it's even throwing a ball. Okay, a lot of movements come over the head, and feel free to dive in there, Dave, if there's any other examples. But really important, those overhead side of things, right? So, and even if, you know, always think about it, if those muscles that are containing the shoulder, that shoulder joint, right, if they're weak, then injuries may occur like dislocations, tears in, you know, your rotator cuff and things like that. So if your body's not strong at those top positions, or your hands in the air, then it might have you might have a risk of injury, right? So really important that we do that. Then we think about the opposite movement now. So we need to bring the force, or bring things towards our body from the top position all the way down to us. Okay, so sorry, I'll backtrack to the other, pushing upwards vertically, your shoulder press. Okay, so things might overhead press, whether it's a dumbbell, whether it's a kettlebell, whether it's a barbell, they're the exercises that sort of we would work through. Now that we sort of reverse that, okay, now we've got to pull things in from the top position down, right? So think of maybe your lat pull downs, your pull-ups, your chin-ups. A lot of you listening probably have heard of those exercises or have done them yourselves, and they're typically going to help move the body up, but in a sort of obviously in our sport examples, it's really helpful in order to bring things towards the body. It even helps a lot with sort of throwing, tackling, again, and also obviously that posture and shoulder positioning. Okay, really important that our shoulders are very mobile. Okay, and if we don't have the strength and the muscles around that, okay, it's gonna, you know, we're gonna prevent some injuries if we, you know, can strengthen those muscles up. So there's some pretty primary and very important movements that need to be squat, hinge. Okay, you push and pull in those movements, and obviously there's variations of that. And then the last one is around core. Okay, so I like sort of thinking about sort of that, you know, core region. So many muscles in that area, but it's really important, right? So if you think of, and I like using footy as an example, just because there's so many, when we are in Australia and there's a lot of people that play it, but footy, basketball, soccer, even netball, right? Your core needs to be very stable. You guys are getting, especially if it's contact, we're getting a bump, a knock, a hit, you're getting tackled. Your body needs to stay stable, right? If you flop, if you, get bumped and you have no real core strength or stability, you're going to fall over, you're going to injure yourself, you're going to hurt yourself, or you're just going to lose possession of the ball, right? So exercises where you can sort of hold position, stay strong through contact, through even when you're sprinting, right? Your body, you don't want to be sort of like a wet noodle. You want to be stable. You want to be stiff. But the body, your arms and ribs are propelling you forward, but your core needs to stay quite tight, quite stable in order to keep you in line, right? So, things like your planks, side planks, rotational movements. We like a lot of what we call Palloff press, and you guys can Google these movements, but Palloff pressing, dead bugs. There's just so many exercises, and how do you know which one's good for you? Well, we understand the anatomy, we understand the muscles, we understand when we research your sport and we analyze it, we understand the movements that are required for those sports. So, and typically, all those movements or muscles or variations of those are going to need to be included in your strength and conditioning program in order for it to be successful and improve your sport. Because if you're just doing exercises and they're just sort of just because you saw it on Instagram or you saw it, that a professional athlete was doing, well, why are they doing it? How's that actually transferring into your sport? So there's a few sort of strength side of things.
Keep an eye out on the second installment of our conversation. If you want to stay updated on the latest episodes, make sure to subscribe to Inner Athlete on both YouTube and Spotify.